So Sanjeev Sabhlok, in 2020 you resigned from the Treasury of Victoria as an economist.
Yeah.
Can you please take us through why that happened?
Well, the immediate reason was that I was being asked to remove my social media posts that were critical of the police state. In fact, I was told that I should remove any posts that are directly or indirectly critical of the government's policy. Now, that to me is actually illegal, unlawful, the requirement, because under the rules we have a lot of freedom in Victoria to speak our mind. And nevertheless, I think after this short meeting with my executive director and the head of the human resource, the people culture guys, I basically decided after the meeting immediately to resign. This is the 9th of September. I just didn't want to waste my time in trying to figure out whether I'm on the lawful side or unlawful, what the boundaries and so on. For me, the whole thing was much more serious than that. The seriousness of the situation is that I was seeing people being beaten up for things that there was no crime being conducted.
That's in Melbourne.
In Melbourne,
Victoria.
You had lots of young people being beaten up. One of them had to go to the ICU and had induced coma. So basically we were seeing brutalities on a completely unprecedented scale against people who had absolutely no risk of catching or spreading the virus. They might spread the virus potentially, but not of catching, and there's no particular threat to them. And if they're walking on the outside alone, that was one of the extremist actions of Brett Sutton, to require people to wear masks outside, where there's absolutely no evidence whatsoever that that has got any role whatsoever in prevention. That was, I think, the point where I had to raise my voice. My social media voice was actually muted before this whole thing.
On who did?
Before I left, I wasn't even saying much.
Because it's a government account?
No, it's not a government, it's a private account.
Right.
But my voice on the social media was much more muted. I was like, okay, I'll be talking mostly in the policy space. But once I decided to leave it, I've been out there on the front foot, attacking these guys for their crimes against humanity, for the people that they've butchered through the lockdowns, the mental torture they've caused to millions. And so I think the whole idea is so unlawful and breaches all possible laws, international laws, Australia's constitution, that I think the reason I'm sitting here with you is to actually participate in the educational process of the Australian community. That is this the kind of Australia we want? Do we want a situation where our basic freedoms are controlled by people on the ground of a virus, which actually turns out to be a little bit worse than a bad flu? So my article in the Australian on the 30th of December, I've been saying this for quite some time, but then I conclusively proved it, that the only country in the world where there wasn't a lockdown, coercive lockdown, there was obviously social distancing and so on, voluntarily, and there were no masks as well. The only country was Sweden, which actually followed the laws, which are also part of our laws on Australia. And at the end of the whole year, their data tells us they've had about 97,500 deaths now, I understand, as about 4,000 to 5,000 more than in the average year of expected. But then last year they had 3,500 fewer deaths than the average year. So the average of the last 2 years is pretty much close to the average of the last 10 years. In fact, it's one of the lowest in the last 10 years. So we've seen that this was not really a major pandemic. This man, Brett Sutton, he's absolutely, I would call him a criminal right now publicly, because he's been saying repeatedly that that this is a Spanish flu. He's been causing hysteria, panic, and terror in the minds of the people. This is no Spanish flu. I said that in the Fin Review on 16th of September. And I proved in the Australian on the 30th of December that this is absolutely not the Spanish flu. So we've been misled by this man, Brett Sutton. He's been advising very wrongly. A lot of health officers in Australia have been advising very wrongly. But the other point that I mentioned in Fin Review is more important, that even if this were a Spanish flu, none of these coercive policies were acceptable. And the reason for that is that for the last 50 years, there's been a hell of a lot of research on pandemics and all that stuff. And so there was a science behind how to deal with pandemics, and that's included in the World Health Organization's October 2019 guidelines, which are available publicly. That is also part of our own Victorian and Australian pandemic plans, and all over the world the same thing. And none of them ever require border closures of the sort we've seen, international border closures either. Even if it were Spanish flu, we would not have any of these things. What we would have, as I've explained in Channel 7 and Channel 9, we would need to have voluntary measures, which are basically people being told, these are educated how to do things properly, stay separate, wear a mask indoor, where it's absolutely not, like a shopping center or something, do that. Wear the proper mask, not a stupid cloth mask, which doesn't mean anything, but wear an N95 mask to really protect yourself and others. But that's only in very high density situations. So there's a lot of science behind this, and lockdowns had been considered and rejected. The reason why we did these lockdowns is because of Xi Jinping.
Right.
It's purely his policy. Never in the history of the world was this done, as I've showed in my International Criminal Court complaint. The last time we ever did this was for Ebola. In 500 years, the only time we've actually shut down cities was for Ebola in Africa, and that was demonstrated to have not worked. What really worked was targeted quarantines. This is not the Ebola. This is not even the Spanish flu. This is not even the Hong Kong flu. It is just a bad flu, a little bit worse than a bad flu, right? We do not need this kind of disproportionate measures. Our laws are very clear on that. The other issue was the closure of the laws, closure of the borders, international borders. That breaches the international law. In addition, the closures within Australia, they breach the Australian Constitution, which is actually the reason we came together in Australia in 1901, January, was to form as a common federation, a common market, where we were free to go around and do what we want. And there was no question of closing borders. So these border closures are illegal. The discrimination among people, like, you mentioned your videographer can't come in, he's in New South Wales. That's because he's now in New South Wales, the Victoria discriminates against him. That's actually unlawful under the Article 117 of the Constitution. So we are seeing the Biosecurity Act forbids that it says, thou shalt not eradicate any virus, any pathogen. Thou shalt not. It's very clear. I'm just summarizing. But the point is that these guys are basically eradicating the virus from Australia by shutting down the borders, shutting down internal borders, shutting down Melbourne, the steel ring, shutting down within your 5-kilometer range, shutting down with a curfew, shutting down within 23 hours per day. You can only get out one. They're shutting down with one and only one objective: to eradicate the virus. Each time they have a little bit of a few days without a virus, they gloat and they claim to have succeeded. Well, they haven't succeeded in getting the virus out of the planet Earth, have they? This whole thing is therefore unscientific. They are copying Xi Jinping. Xi Jinping has done this for a very precise reason, a very particular reason, and which is to eliminate Donald Trump. His biggest enemy has been Donald Trump. He wanted to create hysteria in the world, and there is so much evidence. The fake videos, I don't know if you remember, but that was a time from the end of January till middle of February. Actually, to the end of February, there was this fake videos of people just falling down, and the fake, hospitals coming up, the fake, everything fake, the massive trucks going out and disinfecting things, all this fake. And remember, not a single video ever leaves China without the approval of CCP. All these were planted. And by the way, that's all recorded in the New York Times, has done a detailed analysis of these, Twitter things, actions by China. So we fell for the trap which Xi Jinping had laid for Donald Trump. We fell for it in Australia. So I think the end result of this, what I'm trying to summarize, is that I had to get out to study this matter further, which is what I've done. To educate the community, to bring us back to a bit of sanity, because the way I'm seeing things now, these lockdowns did not stop. I was expecting them to have stopped completely because people would have realized, but it seems they didn't realize, because we have people like Dan Andrews coming out like, every second day on the screen, now probably less, but earlier it's like every day, and this is the only thing to talk about. And everybody's made hysterical by this Brett Sutton man who's absolutely criminal, because he's been scaring people with false data. He is actually a scientist. He's to be held to account. I believe this man should be really, really held to account for his actions of misleading us. He's misled the Premier. I can blame Dan Andrews. Yes, he should have known better. But he's got this officer who is giving him the fraudulent advice, the most fraudulent advice. What happened when an article came out and one of the media people asked Dan Andrews, he said this is only his opinion. They just trashed my opinion. I'm actually been advising Dan Andrews. He doesn't realize I'm there in the background advising him on so many cabinet submissions. And my advice, I've been there for 15 years in the government in Victoria advising different governments, okay? I'm not giving him rubbish out here. Every single piece of information that I provide publicly is well documented, well backed up. The main thing that I argue now is that we are violating and breaching human rights. The other one that the International Criminal Court complaint that that you mentioned, is basically the Rome Statute, Article 7 of the Rome Statute. We are a co-signatory, Australia. There are many countries involved, and we've signed to ensure that there shall not be any crime against humanity in Australia. We've signed that, and what does it say? Thou shalt not do mass mental health, torture and so on. So basically what we've seen this time was, and that's one of the big things I've been addressing. Yes, there are a lot of people who died earlier than they should have in these lockdowns, and there were people who died at home because they were so scared they didn't go and get themselves an ambulance in time or whatever. And those deaths are definitely recorded. We have about 180 of them, I think, in Australia. That's what our numbers I had, and not many more suicides. But we do have a mental health calamity where children were the sharp increase in self-harm by the children of Australia, Victoria, and the mental torture that complaints that people have been writing to me about their own mental health. But I've been talking to interviewers like Matt Lawson, who's a young guy who's got 30,000 people on Instagram. He was telling me that every week he was getting about 15 people who were desperately wanting to talk to him about their suicidal urges. So what is going on was, people didn't really commit suicide at the end, many of them. That is really good. But at the end of the day, there was massive mental torture. And so these are the kind of things that I believe these are called crimes against humanity.
So Hugh Tobin of Tobin Brothers Funeral Homes, he released a series of mental health videos because he was seeing that it was he was seeing the increase. Although the state coroner came out and said there wasn't a great increase, he did meet with Mr. Tobin, and Mr. Tobin's concern was, so he's been in the funeral business for roughly 30 years, and he said it was in 2020 he had never seen so many suicides. So I'm not sure how the statistics didn't quite match up, but from his personal experience. So I think, so to move more into the this breaking of Australian laws. So in 2020, I spoke to a number of people in Australia who had left their own country, escaped their own country, left it to come to this bright and wonderful and free Australia. And there are so many in Australia because there's been waves and waves of people leaving war zones and various issues. And they're telling me we left this to get away from it, and now we're getting all this authoritarian socialism again.
Totalitarian, yeah.
So it's hard to know what the rules are, because no one seems to be applying sticking to the constitutions. We don't really know what they are.
The Clive Palmer case is quite illuminating, as well as the Supreme Court case in Victoria. Both of these I've cited in my complaint, and both of them, in these cases, I believe the court has erred very dramatically. So in the Clive Palmer case, the High Court has not yet issued its judgment, but it determined that Clive Palmer was wrong to object to the closure of the West Australian border, which is what the case was in the High Court. The High Court has still not yet provided its determination. The problem here is that the Article 92 is very, very clear. It says that there shall be, essentially that thou shalt have complete freedom of trade, commerce, and intercourse. These are the three words used across the whole country. It's basically a common federation, common country. And in a common country, there are no internal borders. There can be definitely administrative zones like a state or something, but there cannot be any internal borders of the sort. And that is very clearly made, and it's also part of the convention that was held in 1891 or something, where this point was very clearly made that there shall be no arbitrary borders or no restrictions between the people of Australia. That was the reason why we came together as a country, rather than staying back in the pre-1901 situation where we were separate countries here, or effectively colonies. The High Court did not has muddled up the matter by claiming, by seeming to claim that there was a policy issue involved, namely whether this was a proportionate action in response to public health concerns. I think the Constitution really is not really a matter that's subject to policy discussion. A Constitution is a hard law. The ball in tennis, it falls on a particular line, yes or no. In this case, borders can be closed, yes or no. That's what the Constitution says. Thou shalt not close the borders. Thou shalt not discriminate against people on the basis of their place of residence. That's all what's happening in this country today. So, in my view, the High Court has erred dramatically, and the reasons, and they've actually, what they did is they passed on their some of their recommendations. They asked the federal court to study this matter and report to them. That study has apparently now come out, and the federal court is using models. It's saying these measures were potentially proportionate because these models were saying that the things could go so bad and topsy-turvy. And there's another thing called the precautionary principle, which I've heavily criticized in my book, The Great Hysteria and the Broken State, where I've actually said that that is the most criminal principle you can imagine. It is the most anti-enlightenment, anti-reason principle that's actually been deliberately implanted into all of Australia's legislation. However, legislation does not supplant the Constitution. The point that has to be kept in mind is that these guys' claims that a precautionary, we had to take precautions, so we shut the damn thing down. No, but the Constitution never allows for that. When Australia came together, they didn't say they can be allow you somewhere. They should have said it very explicitly. The point I'm making is that there is no explicit exemption for your little policy principles. You might cook up any policy principle, but that does not override the Constitution. The rules of tennis are clear. The ball is here or there. There's no gray area there, guys. So what's happened is, and the Biosecurity Act is even more clear. Thou shalt not eradicate a virus. They are criminally eradicating the virus. In fact, the Western Australian Premier is absolutely a spot-on criminal in the sense that he's saying he wants to eradicate the virus. At least people like Dan Andrews know that they would be caught and penalized for actions of, for criminality if they were to actually say that they were eradicating. So they keep on saying that they're not eradicating, they're just trying to flatten the curve. They lie all the time because they're actually eradicating. We know that. Yeah, but they say that we are flattening the curve, which is nonsense because the hospitals are empty, the ICUs are empty. So but the Western Australian Premier actually said that he wants this to be clarified. We all should be saying it openly that this is to be eradicated, but eradication is prohibited. So, what we're saying is the premiers who are actually charged by us as the people to uphold our own laws and our Constitution. The High Court itself, which is charged to uphold the Constitution, has contaminated that and allowed this kind of thing to happen. The Supreme Court case of Victoria is another illustrative example where there was, it was the curfew case, sorry. It was the curfew case, now it comes back to my mind. The idea that you could have a curfew and the fact that it could be proportionate is so preposterous. So, under the Public Health Act, every action has to be proportionate. The Supreme Court of Victoria, I haven't seen its judgment yet, unfortunately I had no time, but basically it said that this curfew was necessary under the situation. I'm sorry, what is the situation, Supreme Court? Because as you can see from my article in the 30th of December in the Australian, and by the way, this is something that's been evident to everybody since mid-April. I've been saying this in mid-April, that this is nothing close to Spanish flu. So how can a curfew be imposed when a curfew was not even ever part of your pandemic plans? There's no publications in the scientific publication that says a curfew is required. When asked, Dan Andrews says, there's not even a recommendation from his chief health officer. Basically, he cooked it up on his own. And then the Supreme Court gives him a free pass. I think our failure has been so extraordinary. I've mentioned in my book, and I think in the ICC complaint, our court system has failed. Our politicians have failed. Our media has failed. And the media, for example, Channel 7, they interviewed me. They took me out on the 17th of September, just outside my office in the Treasury. And they did spend 1 hour interviewing me. And then after that, the interview was canned. Even though this Denham Hitchcock, who interviewed me, was very supportive and very, very happy with the interview.
During the interview?
During the interview. But then his bosses canned the damn thing. Okay, so what we're seeing is the crushing of any honest opinion in Victoria, in Australia, on the ground that this is such a terrible thing and so scary that the moment we start asking questions, we're basically going to kill people. If you ask a question, that's not killing people. I've been always saying wear a mask. I've been saying wear a mask indoors. I've been saying wear a mask which is N95. Take precautions. Do social distancing. but don't coerce people. Don't beat up people, for God's sake. You're supposed to look after their health. The mental health of the young, to me, is the most concern, because these people are actually the least affected by the virus. The worst that they can do is to carry it and then transmit it to somebody else. Now, here's a case that there's a beauty of this whole the way pandemics work. That's why my book has a full chapter on how the biology of pandemics. I've got a very strong science background, so I understand the whole thing fairly thoroughly. So I've explained that actually if the youth were to get the virus and to recover, which is what most of them, I think 99.98% or something will, what happens then is the virus has nowhere to go. So the sooner they recover, the better for the elderly, because they have fewer people to transmit. Right? So my sister in Delhi and her family all got the virus, right? And that's why I've said, please go and meet my parents who are very elderly, so they can go and meet anytime. I don't care, because they're completely, they have immunity, so they can't pass it on. So what we're seeing is the violation of science. The young should have been allowed, like in Sweden, to carry on engagement, do their normal activities, fairly, with some precautions, but not crazy like this, what we're seeing here. And then we've got this hysteria where I've seen young toddlers in the open park wearing masks, toddlers. Parents have been so hysterical that they're thinking that their toddlers are going to catch the thing, but actually children's innate immune response is so strong. There is nowhere in the world where children have caught this virus. The very few exceptional cases, of 1 or 2 cases, are probably those who have some other thing. Children also have other things in life, it's not the only. So they might have a comorbidity, but it's so rare and it's almost impossible for them to, because they have a very strong immune system. With this kind of knowledge out there, for us to be in this current situation, I think is totally untenable, where we've locked our borders down. We're talking of 2022 being another year of, up to 2022 actually, 2021 being another year.
Oh, don't say that.
The guys are sitting with their, the trigger to impose lockdowns. Dan Andrews, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. And I didn't go to New South Wales because I knew this was going to do it. So when this was going on, my whole family went, my wife went and came back. She just came back about half an hour before they closed the border down. Half an hour before. She just managed to get a bus and get back in time. And so she did the test negative, etc. And so she didn't have to isolate and all that stuff. So we're seeing some madness of an extraordinary sort here that I think Australians need to start thinking about.
And from an economic point of view, I mean, I'm talking to shop owners who talk to other shop owners, and there's a lot of restaurants and things who are running insolvent, and they're only still there because of the job seeker, job keeper, which is now tapering off, has tapered off for some while. When that finishes in March, I'm told that a number of businesses are just going to shut down.
Yeah,
we've already seen. I took 1,500 photos of for lease signs just in Melbourne. So I got some volunteers to help me, and we had up to 6 shops in one photo. So easily over 2,000 shops, 400 photos in the CBD alone. Now, that's one consequence. And when you lose your business, that was probably everything. You'd invested everything in your life into that business. It kept you going. It gave you purpose. It might have kept if you had a family, it kept your family.
Yeah, your
family
home
going.
mortgage. Yeah.
So once you lose that, maybe your relationship breaks down. Maybe you if it gets the worst of the worst, you lose your kids at the court. And these consequences, just from 2020 alone, are expected to last at least 5 years. Now, surely we can't keep bonding off Australia. We've already bonded off billions and billions of dollars. So if we go into another lockdown, the consequences to all the children who really don't have a voice, but other than ending up as statistics in hospitals for abuse in the homes. They might have been in an abusive family. I spoke to teachers who works in difficult schools, and the kids were clinging to them. The last thing they wanted to do, this is back in March, was spend 24 hours in their home. The schools were their sanctuary, for a better term. So if we go back into another lockdown, we haven't heard about many of the consequences of the first one. So, how are we going to survive another one?
Yeah, absolutely right. So I think So I think the general point you make is absolutely critical. That we have to sit back, we have to review what we've done, realize that this has been a big mistake. We've got to realize that we've been taken in by China. We've fallen into its trap. The trap was meant for Donald Trump. They managed to kick him out, which is what they wanted. In the process, they've also caused a lot of harm to the West. The West has adopted the China ways, the totalitarian ways, which are not consistent with our basic, Western civilization, I call it, where, we have a long history, and I've got a book on that, The Discovery of Freedom, which is about 700 pages. It's on my website, which I analyze how we became free. And now what we've done is we've completely gone back on all of that. So this is an opportunity where I also have highlighted the failure of our political parties, where I believe both the Liberal and Labour parties have failed us. A few elements in both the parties are reasonably okay. There's still one or two elements here and there, but for the large part, both these political parties have taken us back to the totalitarian dark ages. So we need either these parties need to wake up, or we might need a new party. And I think I've been talking about a new party as well to young people. Wherever I go, I say, guys, you've got to come out and take a stand, because otherwise these guys seem to have gone, they've gone mad. What do you do when someone's gone mad? You can't. So the equilibrium is that these are the two parties, but if there is a threat outside, then we can potentially change this equilibrium. So I really don't know that anybody's got because from my feedback that I've got so far, it's extraordinarily lukewarm. The youth simply aren't bothered. They don't care, or they don't understand. The Matt Lawson guy is a good example where, after all these things that I've spoken. So I was talking to Matt Lawson, and basically mentioned this to him that, look, guys, if you don't really wake up and take this seriously, remember you're basically shifting the entire, the ball game in Australia. The system is being shifted right now in front of your eyes. Australia is changing, and unless you want to really, continue with this kind of a system, you actually got to do something. And so, unfortunately, what I'm trying is that these young people haven't come forward yet. A couple of others I've been talking to as well, but there's some interest. But really, what we need is either a serious party, which would be really good. There's a couple of other parties that have contacted me by email. I've been saying, hey guys, we've got about 35, 40 small parties in Australia, all trying little things. You come together, or basically it's not going to happen. Nothing's going to happen, right? So I'm very much close to the Liberal Democrats of Australia in terms of my ideological stance, let's say. But they don't seem to have a bigger vision either for Australia. So essentially, I think we're basically hanging out here, waiting for the people to wake up. So the best way to wake up would really be the cheapest way, would be for the Liberal parties and the Labour Party to wake up. The party members.
The party itself.
Where we don't have to really go and recreate, start the new wheel and so on. One of the reasons with these other parties, small parties, is they're quite extremist in certain things. They're generally one-issue parties. They really don't have, they're not centrist. As an economist who has been advising both Labour and Liberal, I actually see them both pretty much the same in their approach, and they're very centrist. Both of them have certain little, problems, but they don't deviate too much from the center. In a good democracy, it's actually the center that has to govern, and the center, therefore, is where we need a new party to come in, which means these little niche parties will have to give up their extremist demands and actually settle for something different, which is pretty unlikely. So the youth are not very enthused. So the cheapest and best solution is for the Liberal Party and the Labour Party, both of them. I just want to remind people that I had voted for Dan Andrews in this case, in this constituency. And the reason was that I thought he's doing a better job than the previous Liberal government, which is so pathetic that because I've served them both and I've seen from inside, I was saying, okay, this Labour is better than the previous Liberal, so let's continue this Labour. But turned out that Dan Andrews has a different approach. But really, what the big parties have the best, opportunity if they want. I've been talking to a few Liberal leaders in Victoria. Unfortunately, I haven't seen much enthusiasm from them to actually do something. A number of Liberal Party people call me every few days, and I'm saying, hey guys, I'm not seeing any change in the in your messaging from Michael O'Brien, for example. If you guys aren't taking the lead, then I've been telling them basically, then people like me will actually have to finally take the lead. I don't want to do that. I've got other things going on in my life, okay? And I really have no interest in spending the rest of my life focusing on Australian politics. I've got a lot of things going on in my India political party, which is what I've been actually focusing on. So I'm a citizen here, but I've got a political party. The Liberal Party of India is actually only the one that I've started. And so I really don't want to replicate my efforts there and do one party here. But I've always told people that, look, I am quite capable of coming and challenging you politically. And I will do it, and I'll organize people if necessary. Do not take me lightly by thinking that I've just resigned my job I'm actually given up my money, and I've given up my much more senior job in India. These guys don't know that I've actually would have been not only potentially the cabinet secretary of India by now, but potentially in the future the governor of many states. I mean, I was in a very, very senior role in India. So the fact that I quit that, because like you said, I came more or less like a refugee from India. India is a very highly socialist and corrupt country, and that's why I determined to fight that. That's my main job, to fight the Indian socialist model. Okay, so and that takes a lot of my time, by the way. I'm here to fight for my freedoms and for the freedoms of my children, and I will not tolerate. And I'm making it clear to Scott Morrison, to Dan Andrews, I will not tolerate what you're doing. I will keep fighting through writings, and if necessary, I'll organize, and I will come out and fight you politically and change you. I think this is where I come from. I have never ever had a difference between what I say and what I do. And the money has never driven me. It's what's driven me is my fundamental freedoms and ability to think. And I think the commitment to the truth. These are the kind of things, and that brings me to things like climate change. These guys are actually ruining Australia as well as through the climate change nonsense. So I think the time may have come for people like me to actually stop just being, bureaucrats and pen pushers at the back, but to come out and tell the people the facts, because these guys have been actually ripping off Australia from every possible way. We had the cheapest electricity in the world at one time. Now we have one of the most expensive, next to Germany and a few other countries. What's happened? How can we possibly have industry in this place? And then we complain, everything comes from China. They're using coal. They've actually expanded the use of coal in the last year. And out here we're busy talking all these targets of renewable energy, 50% and so on. We're killing our smelter plant in Portland. Everything is being destroyed, industry being destroyed, because we have got the highest. So tell me, Sam, if these guys aren't going to do the job, then whose job is it, Sam, to do this job? Then people like me need to ultimately get out of our shells and say, enough is enough. So I think the time may come. At the moment, it's just a bit of an off the equilibrium threat that I am able to organize things for you, against you. I will join you. I've told both the parties, and I've made it very clear. Any party that agrees to my fundamental plank, which is just do what you're doing, but on these matters, follow the law. Don't do lockdowns, don't do these things, and I'm with you. I can join you and I can be your member in the parliament, no problem. But if you do not do that, I've told them, Sam, I'm telling them again, I will not rest. Whatever the rest of my life I've got, I'm not going to be allowing, I will not allow myself to be, trapped by people who don't value me and my liberty. My liberty trumps them because I'm born sovereign free. I don't know about them being born sovereign free. I was born sovereign free, okay? Born free and will die free.
Well, I think, your enthusiasm and the way that you speak, it certainly resonates, I think, with a lot of people. And so how do other people get the courage to leave their position in the government, or to not stand up for it? Because I think that's a very hard choice.
Hard job, yeah.
Especially if you have a family.
Don't do that. I'm not recommending anyone leave their job. No. I'm actually talking of the people who actually in the political space, to change their minds. Because I'm actually speaking not as a bureaucrat anymore. I'm speaking as a politician. Okay, I'm a politician in India for the last 20 years, and I'm a politician here now. I'm not simply a guy who's sitting out here letting things happen. Okay, and politicians are not. You don't have to be. So people don't have to leave the government to do this. Okay, what I'm saying is the common man. Among them, people have to rise. And so the first step is really not even to rise. I don't think they need to rise. I think the first step is to just understand. I think the biggest problem is that they are still hysterical, putting masks on their toddlers and so on. This is complete nonsense. I think people the first thing they need to know that they've been taken for a big ride. They've been conned. They've been cheated by Mr. Scott Morrison and by Mr. Dan Andrews and the whole gang of these Greg Hunt and all these characters out there on the television, telling them lies, about 40 lies per minute, if that's possible. Every single thing they're telling us is lies. Yeah. And so the first thing is to read something different from what the government pumps out. Just look at the facts yourself. Go to the Swedish official website, check the number of people who died, and just find out for yourself, okay, if this was a great pandemic, presumably this should have been something that pops up in the total number of deaths. All these models, and the other was the stupid models. 96,000, 100,000 was the number being given for Sweden as the extra deaths that would happen. As I said, I'm struggling to find 2,000 extra deaths, 2,000 this year, because although there are about 4,500, 5,000 extra deaths, if you look at from the average year, 3,500 were less last year. They would have died this year anyway. This happens all the time. Anytime there's a mild flu season anywhere in the world, the next year there is a higher number of deaths among the elderly, because they would have died last year with the flu, but they survived. Now they've died. So the actual extra people killed by this, and all of them mostly still in the age group 70 and 75 plus, is barely 2,500, 2 to 2,500 in Sweden, out of 93,000 average that people die. Tell me, how big is that as a pandemic? How big? How scared are you supposed to be? Right? So first of all, get unscared, and then of course the people who can, like the people who've lost their businesses and so on. Hey guys, you got nothing to lose. Those are the people who create the revolution. Come in and start a little movement, political movement. Do not waste time in giving talks and lectures which are not focused. So I think the first thing is, I'm not left my job to simply protest. I've left the job to change the situation. This is what my interview on Channel 7, which was canned, said. I said it very clearly. I have not left my job just to come and tell you this is bad. Sure. I've come to change the situation. I will not tolerate it. I do not tolerate anyone trampling on me. Do not touch me. Do not put your stupid mask on my face when I'm walking outside. I'll put it when I want to do it, when I'm persuaded about it. I have the birthright. It is all protected under international law. No compulsion on medical issues. You cannot compel anyone to wear a mask. These illegal orders which are trampling on my fundamental existence, I will not let you do this. Okay? And that's why I'm asking people to first wake up, and then to recognize that they actually are not the servants and the chicken that these guys want them to be. They are not the chicken of Scott Morrison, who can be locked up inside a chicken coop, which is Australia, or a chicken coop of Dan Andrews, saying you stay inside house for 23 hours and up to 5 kilometers and all. We're not. If you are, then by all means carry on. I have nothing to do about Australia. I think then it's a gone case anyway. But if there are people out here who really recognize themselves as humans, now I'm saying don't leave your job in the government. Please, the government needs people. The good people in the government, they're required, they should continue. In fact, I know a lot of economists who've been advising against these things. The fact that Dan Andrews doesn't listen doesn't mean the people in the government are bad, okay? I'm again and again insisting, do not leave your jobs. What I want is the best talent to stay where they are in the government, but we do want the people who've been affected. Who are the affected people? The small businesses. They need to wake up first, and then they need to organize politically. Just have a political party with 40,000 people. These guys will get shit scared. The word I shouldn't be using, but that's what's going to happen. They're going to really, really realize that the time is up. Either they change, or we will change them. I think there's no choice, because if you let them continue, like this guy saying the whole of 2021, Australia will remain locked. Daniel Andrews sitting with this thing, I'm going to shut my border, I'm going to shut this, I'm going to shut that, I'm going to lock down this. He's just trigger happy. He just wants to shut everything down. And Brett Sutton, the liar in chief, has not stopped causing hysteria, even when the data are very clear. Anyone can check the data themselves. So when we have this massive disinformation and misinformation, which I call the totalitarian misinformation, they bought in the Jinping hysteria. They're hysterical, but they're lying. And I think the people need to first stop the hysteria, look at the facts, and then wake up and tell the police, sorry, your lies, the time to lie is over. And if you don't listen, I'm going to Sanjeev. I am going to organize the entire Australia against these guys. I'm not sitting here just because I've got nothing to lose. None of us have anything to lose but our own freedoms. If we allow our freedoms to be lost, then who is to blame, Sam? Tell me that. who is to be blamed at the end of the day when people allow their freedoms to be trampled on?
So on the Liberal Facebook pages of Liberal politicians, if you make a critique on a decision that's made by Scott Morrison, you have a lot of Liberal voters, fans, who will just go against you. Now it'll be even up to the point where you're saying that we've seen increasing, basically a socialist country for a good part of 2020, and you'll make a critique on shutting down businesses or mental health or something, and people in Liberal echo chambers will just defend it to the point of they're defending socialism.
Yeah.
So how on earth do you get people out of echo chambers?
I think this is the fact is that at the end of the day, they will all learn that they've been fooled, okay? At the end of the day. Cannot continue for 35, 40 years. Let me assure you that. It may take 1 month, 2 months, 6 months, 1 year, 2 years. At the end of the day, they'll all realize they've been gypped. The education that I'm providing here, and my articles in my book and my criminal complaint to the criminal code, and my many articles on the Times of India blog, which I keep writing regularly. I practically write almost 3,000 words every week. All the stuff is out there for people to actually think about. Maybe by some chance accident they will somebody might listen to this, and so he might say, okay, this guy is saying something. He doesn't sound like a total lunatic. I don't think I sound like that, because I'm actually giving you freedom to go and check everything that I say. I'm not saying that I'm a god. I'm saying I'm just presenting my analysis. The data are out there, and I've got references for every single thing that I say. That there was never a lockdown before in the history of the world. The only time it was done is Ebola in Africa. I'm saying everything which is full authenticity, and check it out yourself. So I'm asking people to do it. Once they realize that they've been cheated, then they're going to actually wake up, because before that they will not. So at the moment they think that Scott Morrison is not cheating them, but he's cheating them every day, morning to night. That's his fundamental job. Otherwise he cannot continue this racket of eradicating the virus and keeping the borders closed. It's so illegal. Imagine a country where you can't leave. That's actually the first thing that's forbidden in in the international law, that thou shalt not. It's like North Korea. We are North Korea. And if people are praising Scott Morrison, I really don't know what to say, because they seem to have not understood who they are. They probably think that they are some kind of sheep. They belong to Scott Morrison's, his pets. I'm not Scott Morrison's pet. Neither is he mine. We're both individual humans. We need our self-respect and our basic freedom. So I think the message might take time. But I think the point is to make it, and to make clear that I'm offering an off-equilibrium threat. And if they do not listen, I'm not going to sit out here for 30 years trapped in this country by these guys. I'm going to fight my way out. In fighting the way out, I'll actually be raising awareness politically. I'm not fighting anybody. I'm fighting politically. I'm a politician. I'm a sovereign individual citizen of Australia, and I'm a politician who wants freedom in Australia. I will get it, and no one can stop me from getting it.
And how do I join your party?
It's not yet there.
It's not.
You need to actually, what I'm saying is you need to actually do it yourself. I'm out here to motivate, to provide support. But if you won't do it, I will get it done.
Now we can find you on sabhlokcity.com.
Yeah, you can just search for my name with this SABHLOK spelling, and then you'll find lots of stuff. Yeah.
All the articles, the ICC report, and your book, the Great Hysteria.
Yeah, the Great Hysteria and the Broken State, but also the recent open letter about the China influence. The China influence is very blatant and obvious. The videos that they created for panic and so on. Their focus was Donald Trump. In the process, we got caught. Yeah. The purpose, as you can see here, is I'm not resting.
Yeah.
I'm letting these guys know that I'm not resting.
Yeah.
I'm letting these guys know that I do not respect you anymore for your trying to trample on my freedoms.
No.
And I actually, that's the kind of language which I think Channel 7 didn't want to put out, because that was a clear-cut case of a guy coming and saying he will not tolerate Australia. I said clearly, I will not tolerate Australia becoming a China. I will not tolerate. It doesn't matter whether I'm trampled, killed, whatever. I will not tolerate. I will not give in my freedoms for the sake of your maniacs. And
are you seeing many other people out there with this?
I really don't know and don't care. I honestly, really, I've done, Sam, I've always done things in my life without regard to anyone else.
Yeah.
I have never ever bothered about what others think. Neither will I ever bother in the future. I do exactly what I want to do, and I will continue doing that, which means I've left my job in India. I just left it.
Yeah.
It took me 2 minutes, and I said, I will not support these kind of corrupt people, and I will fight them. And I'm actually fighting them. When I came out, I said I'm going to fight them, and I'm fighting them. And we've got a party in India which is fighting them on the ground, and it's growing. It's growing, and it has taken me 20 years to reach there. I'll take another 20 years. But I will not let this happen, okay? So here's the deal. We are all responsible at the end of the day for every action of ours in our whole life. Every single action, right? So at this stage, how can we possibly tolerate, these kind of impositions? Yeah. So I think it doesn't really matter whether other people think or not think. It doesn't matter what they do not do. I am quite convinced, that this is the way to do the right things. I will not let go. I'm fighting for India's liberty for the last 20 years. That's my job. I'm fighting. I'm making sure. Every single day I've been writing, talking. I've got a big team of people now in India. That's the politics I'm talking of. We're doing real politics, and so I'm organizing real political work on the ground in India. That's my main job. That is why I was part-time in the Treasury. I was doing a lot of stuff here on the side. And I had no intention of trying to get involved in Australian politics, because it's okay. This is not the greatest place in the world, but it's I would say 80% there, which is fine for me to continue my job, and then I'd spend my time fixing India, which is at 0% compared to this place. At the moment, India is better than this place in terms of freedoms, because India you can actually do more or less everything you want. There's no restrictions when traveling within the country. There's no restrictions traveling outside India. What has happened here is the most extraordinary amount of perversion and extremism that you can imagine, where people have just forgotten that they're doing this to other humans. They have no right to do this to other humans. There's a thing called law, judicious rule of law. You can't just go on beating up people if they're not wearing a mask. Since when did you get the right to do that? Then only that, this guy was trying to run, so the police bashed him with a car, and he went to the ICU. He had to be put into induced coma.
Yeah, it was after a protest. He wasn't part of the protest.
Yeah, he's kind of a man who's not even aware of what he's doing. I think.
He'd come out of a hospital. But,
yeah, he's a kind of a unfortunate victim of this whole mania.
But I think the police were so worked up from that day, because hundreds from all around Melbourne, will go in and arrest people. Cup Day, there was 400 people were arrested on Cup Day.
Yeah,
mothers, fathers, grandparents, grandkids. And what were they? They were protesting the consequences of government lockdown.
Yeah. So even the democratic protest was curbed. That's why it's a police state. That's why I don't think it was worthwhile for me to stay inside, because, as I said, I've reached a point in my life and my career, and I just don't care. I'm not here for the money. I can survive. I can shrink if required. I can sell this house and go and live in a really tiny place at half the price somewhere else. I can shrink my thing, but I will not shrink my heart. I can shrink my physical things. Who cares? But how can you possibly shrink your entire existence? Because out here, I felt I felt respected as a professional. I felt I was living in a reasonably good country. I had good friends, and the whole thing was fairly good. And so I was able to focus on the India issue, which is quite problematic. But out here, that I am myself part of a situation worse than India was totally unexpected. And I'm making it clear to these guys. I'm making it clear, no matter how many talks, maybe whether it's here or there, that I'm not going to let you get away with it. My complaint to the International Criminal Court is not something to be taken lightly. I am not here.
150 pages.
Yeah, it is not a lightly complaint, and it is something that I'm going to push further with a supplementary submission. Make sure that all the laws of the land are followed, the constitution is followed, and so on. So the fact that all these guys, the High Court, everybody has simply abandoned us, that's ridiculous. The media are sitting there and claiming that it's a good thing that we close the borders. Now we don't have much case, so what a great success, and therefore we should vaccinate everybody after that and so on. All I've said, and I've said in my book, is everybody is free to choose. They can sit at home as long as they want. I mean, could this whole thing not have been done without closing the borders? Tell me. So yes, half the people would stay at home, half would go out. So the airline industry would reduce to half, but right now it's zero. What would have happened is that some people would have taken risks because they are the young category or whatever, and others would have stayed at home. People can choose, right? How come Australians don't have that common sense to realize that this whole thing could have been done voluntarily, without the police coming in and beating up people, without shutting down borders and controlling things in the manner that they've been doing? And did you, I mean, the kind of reports when they shut down the borders, that's why I didn't go to New South Wales to meet my son. I've not met him for many, many months now. And the reason is that I refuse to step out of this stupid state until it's actually free, because it's not worth my while to go there and get caught, which is many people did get caught. But the people who came back, 3,000 or something of them on a road, stuck somewhere for 9 hours or 10 hours without toilet, without proper water, food. That's the kind of thing you create. These, by the way, are crimes. If we treat them as less than crime, if you were to do this to somebody else, tell me, to lock you up for 7 hours or 9 hours without water, food, toilet, would that not be a crime? Just because the government does it make less of a crime? I don't think so. I think that's a crime. And so the fact that the people of Australia, many of them are getting aggravated. Many of them who have suffered directly are, obviously not very happy. But there's a lot of people who still think that Australia is a great success. And I don't think I want to be in such a kind of success story, like this kind of success, where you actually force people to do things against their will, beat them up, for the sake of your not getting a virus. By all means, shut yourself inside your house, put as many masks as you want, or whatever you feel like doing. It doesn't matter to me. You're free. Go and do it. Don't go outside. Get online delivery, from Safeway. Don't go anywhere outside your home. Who's stopping you? How can you say that, no, I've got to stop you from leading your life? I think that's where things have gone topsy-turvy, where probably, I don't know, maybe this to do with the education system here. It's fundamentally, but even the USA had the same problem, right? Most of the states there did the same thing. So it's not that, because in USA they actually educate you on the Declaration of Independence. They tell you about the Constitution. They do a lot of that. Out here, the Australian Constitution is complete shit, right? We've got not a single mention of human liberty and so on. We just have to interpret a few things from the side, because that is basically a document on governance. It's not a document for people's freedoms. The Australian Constitution is actually quite the worst constitution I can imagine. But the fact that we did not even have basic education in liberty in Australia has come through very clearly this time. So yeah, I think as I said, I don't even care, because I'm free. You can't catch me. I'm abiding by your law. You're not going to catch me, breaking the law. I'm not going to do it. But when I do it, I'll do it when I have 10,000 people behind me, and we'll all go and do it. But that's a separate stage. But you can't catch me because I'm not breaking the law. But I will keep on saying what I have to say. I've been banned by LinkedIn. I've been banned by Facebook twice. I've been banned by Twitter. And I will then say somewhere else, even if I have 5 people listening. I don't care, because as far as I'm concerned, life is not meant, my life is not at somebody else's mercy. I don't live for others. They have no business to interfere in my life like this. And so I'm going to keep saying. And I will organize. And I'm not sitting here to simply talk. I'm actually organizing. And Monica is there, for example. And
Reignite Democracy Australia. Monica Smith.
So Monica Smith, yes. So I mentioned her when I met her last time. I said, hey, you seem to be a really good person for this kind of job, if you want to do it. The issue is really ultimately, there's no compulsion. People have their own careers and other things to look after. And so I'm not saying that they should do it. I'm saying anyone who's suffered, who's got nothing to lose. You need to be at a point in time in your life when you say, I have nothing to lose. Without that, you're going to be dependent on these characters all the time. You're going to say, okay, what are you going to do to me? Push me into a small village with, small house? What, $10,000 property? Fine. I can happily live in that. So if you can't really push me physically, then you're lost. You can't do nothing to me. But if you can still push me physically somehow, my career, my this, my that, then of course you are not going to be able to do this. So that's why I think I'm not blaming the young, because they're in that condition where not all of them have that luxury. They have their family, they've got other things to do, and so really I don't want to push anyone. But it doesn't really matter. Like I said, in India, when I left my job, it didn't matter to me whether I'm the only guy in India who's talking this thing, or the only guy talking about a political party that is committed to liberty. That was 20 years ago, more than 20 years ago.
I've seen you talking to big audiences.
Not very big, fairly smallish audiences, but there are these village audiences. I won't say big audiences. I haven't organized any of them yet. But the thing is that when I go to India, I go to the villages and wake up the people and tell them about their basic. Because what's happened is, if you look back in history, it's only fairly recently, in the last few hundred years, that we've understood that we actually not, the property of the king. It's been quite some time for us to, taken some time to wake up, and Australia has not woken up yet. I think they basically still think that the government has all powers just because they're a government. They don't. The government is our servant. The first thing that we keep on emphasizing in all our Indian media, in our posters, everywhere, banners, the government is our servant. When that relationship is shifted, then and only then can you start talking about individual liberty, because otherwise people are not sure. They think, hey, the government there, the policeman is there, the big guy is going to tell us what to do. We have to listen. They've got this conditioning, right? For thousands of years we've been conditioned. Now we've got to uncondition ourselves. I think I've written a book. It takes a few hundred years to do that. I'm not in a rush. So when I say 20 years for me to keep doing what I'm doing for Australia and for India, of course, the rest of my life, it's not a big deal, because in the long run it takes hundreds of years. How many Thomas Jeffersons have we had in Australia? How many people here who actually talked about liberty at all? Think about it. Very few, right? So Australia has actually not had, which is one of the first things I noticed, was there was no author from Australia that I was willing to waste my time reading. I couldn't find anybody here whom I would read. I read a lot of people from the USA, because the USA has got a 300-year history of liberty, 250 years, 300-year liberty, not 300 years, but 250 years, let's say, of thinking about it. Patrick Henry onwards and so on, the Jeffersons and virtually, John Adams, and all of these guys had very intelligent debates about liberty. There is none. I've not seen anything such. The closest I've heard of is a guy called this Tony Abbott guy, who was in one of these panels, where with me in December.
Tony Abbott guy?
Yeah. He's just a kind of average character, right? He's good, but he still doesn't understand liberty, and that's my real problem with him. He's written some reasonably good work, and so I would be willing to read him, I would say, but I wouldn't waste my time reading Tony Abbott. What I'm trying to say is that there is no person in Australia whom I would waste my time actually reading. That is the tragedy of Australia. A small country, really, really tiny. The population is 25 million, which is not even a drop in the ocean compared to in India. It's like nothing. And the USA, very small compared to USA. But the USA had only 3 million people at the time of independence. And among the 3 million, it had 25, wonderful writers about liberty. What has happened? I really can't explain, but why is Australia so eager? Why are Australians so eager to give up their liberty to the government? It's a very interesting question. I haven't understood why yet.
No, the comment I hear a lot is the idea that the government is looking out for us, and they're doing the best that they can. Hopefully, people will look at investigate the consequences of 2020, and probably realise that these people
never take the government for granted. The government should always be treated with skepticism. Otherwise, you're going to be, basically ripped apart, which is. So this is what's happened. Sorry about this ramble, but I think I've reached a point where I'm just answering your question about what if no one else was thinking about the world like I do. It doesn't matter. Simple, short answer. I don't care. It'll take many years, hundreds of years. But each little thing that I do here, each little thing that I write, maybe another person I reach out, the person will wonder, why the hell is this guy talking like this? Is he the God? Well, I'm almost talking like a God, right? I'm an independent God. I'm a sovereign guy. I'm actually waking up people. I'm saying, you are all sovereigns. Like I say in my Twitter account, I'm the Pope of...
The Pope of Liberty.
I'm the Pope.
Self-appointed.
And I'm a self-appointed Pope. I'm the King of liberty and reason. And I keep saying, whenever people ask, please declare yourself as another Pope. This is one Pope where there's no limit. There can be 6 billion. I want 7 billion Popes of liberty. That's what I want. Whereas a church will say, I want only one Pope. I want 7 billion popes or mamas, whatever you call yourself. So I think the point I'm trying to make is you got to recognize your birthright as an individual organism in the history of. That's what I said in the Channel 7 interview, which I really wish they'd give me back my footage anyway, because they took a long, with big cameras. I said, I owe my origin not to any of these Scott Morrisons or Daniel Andrews. Do I owe my origin to these guys? I owe my origin to the history of evolution on Earth. There are 4 billion years of evolution, 3 billion years or 500 million years of creatures, etc., that all have formed into me ultimately. I have no allegiance to, my relationship with these characters is purely equal. There is not the slightest difference in my existence as a human being. Yes, in the office there's a hierarchy. I've quit that. I'm a self-sovereign citizen. Back again, I can say what I want. And I want you to stop doing this to me. And if you don't do that, I'm going to stop you, but politically. Yes, it may take time. Yeah. So I think the point about politics here, it can potentially go on for 20 years. But we can't afford, Sam, to sit out, our lives under the so-called blessings of our government and gods and so on. There is no God. These are not gods. And if there's a God, it's an individual choice. What's a God? So we have a one-to-one relationship with nature and a one-to-one relationship with God. That's it. The other guys are equal in every single way. They have no right to trample on us and say, I will put a mask on you. So, okay, I'll do it. I'm actually quite capable of understanding. Explain to me why. Give me the peer-reviewed literature. Show me why a curfew is required, and I'll do it. No, they will not show me that. What does it say? They think they're superior to me? I'm sorry, Sam, no one out here can get away with that. That's the fundamental point I'm trying to get at to the people of Australia. Do not let anyone tell you to do what to do. You explain. Like a child, do you force your child to do something? You explain to the child. Let the child do his own thing. That's a fundamental lesson of bringing up a child, right? You don't go and compel children. You basically show them why it's in their interest to do a certain thing. So what here we seeing compulsion. I didn't expect it from Australia.
Compulsion.
Yeah, this compulsion is what is the problem here.
Compulsion.
For everything. The curfews, the masks, the compulsion, the coercion. That's the problem. That's the only problem. I'm perfectly happy putting on masks. I in fact said in Channel 7 interview, I was wearing a mask at that time. I said, that's the law. I'm wearing it. Even if it's outside, I object, but I'm still wearing it. But I actually wear it on my own. I've been writing about it for the last 6 months. That please wear a mask, N95 mask when you're close to people, because at that time it was supposed to be a very dangerous virus. Later on we realized not. But even then, there's no harm in wearing a mask if you feel you might catch a virus or spread it. But please do it voluntarily, right? Or if you're an employee of a hospital, that's a different issue, because then you have to obey the laws of the hospital. Fine, do that. But I think the whole idea. But remember, the contract to work in the hospital is voluntary. If you don't want to wear a mask, leave the job and do something else. Go and be a farmer, right? But the point I'm saying is that every single thing should be based on individual choice. That's the first principle of a free society, of a civilized society. And I think what we've lost here is that freedom and the choice. And what you have here is some people without any reasoning telling you to do certain things. And if you don't do it, they have the power to beat you up. That's something which is to be objected. When this is basically brings us back to Thoreau, the civil disobedience, brings us back to Gandhi, brings us back to Martin Luther King, brings us back to all these other civil disobedience guys. That if the law is unjust, then there is a need to object and to rebel. So this is a case of rebellion. I'm not just left my job. I've left many jobs. I've left this other job as well. But I'm not left my life until I leave my life. I'm fighting for my liberty. So I think we need to get that message across, that our life is not a plaything for others. We have to be told why. We have to be explained why. Do you know the kind of nonsense reasoning that they provide in the High Court and so on, which is what I've criticized thoroughly? The High Court has accepted this ridiculous reasoning, when even the courts are unable to distinguish good reason from bad reason, they should have at least learned some basic critical thinking, right? Just because some model says so, and then there's a thing called precaution, you start shutting borders. But there's so much alternative evidence, and so when Albert Dedon asked me, and this was Tony Abbott in that panel, and Matthew Guy and others, he said, why did these courts do this? So I said, because our lawyers in Australia are absolutely, I didn't say the words that strong, but they don't understand the law. How could they have gone and allowed this kind of rubbish arguments from the government, the prosecutor or whatever, the government, the defender, to get away with it? Because you would first show that models are not evidence. I can create a model of everything and anything. Models are just mathematics. It's like English. If I say something in English and I put it in maths, in algebra, that becomes a model. That's very straightforward stuff. But just because you say something doesn't mean it is true. So just because the model says something doesn't mean it's true. It's not the science. The first test of science is proof. You can write anything you like. Where is the proof, right? So that is therefore not evidence. So I think that they missed that. And then the second part of the precautionary principle, which is saying something might go wrong, therefore we don't need the evidence. That's what this principle says. Tell me, how the hell can you allow such a principle to be part of your legal system? And that's why I think that things have become quite bad. I've been writing against the precautionary principle in my job as an economist for 15 years. In many places I've objected and so on. And in fact, recently I objected for the Great Ocean Road, where they included that even for the Great Ocean Road Authority. There's a new authority that's been created. That is a thing which I was involved in the creation of the authority and the bill. I objected vehemently to this ridiculous nonsense, the precautionary principle. Apparently that, they will be able to spend as much money as they want to protect the road from eroding, but as a precaution. But guys, did you know this is the ocean, this down south here, has got the fastest or strongest winds in the entire world. There is no other place in the world with stronger winds that come and bash the road. The road will be eroded. Okay, you can't stop it. You have to keep going inside as and when the thing happens. You can't take prevention and start putting, I don't know what you'll put. If you think about the precautionary principle, it'll say, I'm going to put the entire world's iron ore, I'm going to dig it up and make a big wall and put it out there, 15 feet high wall, like this thick. This is the kind of thing that can lead to. Precautionary principle is maniac, is like a maniac principle. It says that reason doesn't apply. Sure. I need to protect this road, therefore I'll do anything. Sure. So these are the kind of things, we have, I've been fighting in the government, but then I realized that maybe it's now time for me to come and fight publicly. So precautionary principle. Yeah. A lot of people don't know these things. No. You probably never heard of this, no. But our laws have been infiltrated in Australia over the last 15 years in particular, but starting from 1990s with this thing called the precautionary principle.
1990s.
Yeah, it started in the 1990s with the environmental movement, which I think declared in 1992 this particular precautionary principle. And then it moved into different bits of legislation, and finally it's now found in every single Victorian legislation. That has been used, by the way. If you read the emergency declarations of Brett Sutton, the two memos, which I've said in my book, in my complaint, international criminal complaint, I've put them at great length, I've discussed them. They talk about this precautionary principle.
It sounds a bit like in the omnibus bill that there was one thing they wanted to do, which was to get authorised officers to take parents away, or to take people away, to put them in a isolation camp, for a better word.
Yeah. They do that. New Zealand has those laws. Yes. Yeah.
So, and the idea, which is exactly what they say in communist China, is that if we think that you
might have it,
be a risk, then we will take action.
Yeah.
So that sounds a bit similar to precautionary.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. In fact, that the precautionary principle overrides proportionality. Okay, it overrides. Imagine that the Great Ocean Road example. So for a society, there is only so much value for a road. Okay, we can only put so much money into a road. If the road doesn't work for us, if it's getting eroded, we will work out whether it's worthwhile, that road, or we'll cancel it, or maybe push it inside. But the precautionary principle says that none of this thinking of proportionality is important. What is important is the road has to be protected at all cost. At all cost. And so you have to protect from this virus at all cost. Even if I think that you might have it, because I am an authorized officer, I have some genius mind. I may think that because of my thinking, I think you are a potential contaminant. Therefore, I have the right to do that because it's a precaution. You're right. It's a precautionary principle thing. The precautionary principle does not care for evidence. The first thing it says that the action shall be undertaken regardless of the evidence. That's actually the principle. Right? So when the precautionary principle is a direct conflict with all of science, all of enlightenment, all of proportionality, therefore, why did we have this principle in the first place? That's why I've written a fairly longish piece in my book against it.
Can it be thrown out? The precautionary principle? Can it be overturned?
This is one of my conditions I put out for all the parties. When I put out, I resigned, I said, I want any party that does these things, that includes throwing out the principle, I will join them. No one joined. No one is going to do it. Both the Liberal Party and the Labour Party are fully committed to this thing. The reason why they're committed, okay, here's the problem. I'll explain to you. Who goes into politics? That's the first question to ask. People who are otherwise well-to-do, but they're busybodies. They love power. So these guys they love any action or let's say law that gives them more power. So these guys in politics all love power, whether they're Liberal Party or Labour Party. Okay, so you're going to see them. They're not the ones who are ever going to say no to the precautionary principle, because it allows them to do whatever they want, whenever they want, without anybody in the court asking them any question. Like the High Court has said, oh yeah, precautionary principle, therefore you can close the Western border, WA border. Fair enough. So all the constitutions can be overridden, everything can be overridden by this precautionary principle. How good is that?
Oh, so that is that the nail in the coffin?
Probably the nail in the coffin of freedom in Australia and democracy in Australia. It's in the nail in the coffin of everything. When you say that I will allow the government to do whatever it wants, whenever it wants, to spend as much money, like, they're just burning the billions of dollars, right? They can do anything they want, and the reason they have, by the way, that's, if you read Bretton Sutton's 2 memos, this is the only reason, really the real reason. First of all, he puts out some random models which are utter nonsense, and then he puts out the precautionary principle, and that gives these people the power to stop all the businesses. It gives people to burn all the money of the future generations. Why would a politician not want that principle? They would love a principle which says, whenever I wake up and I think of anything, whatever comes to my mind, that is the best and most beautiful thing in the world. Therefore, I can do it, and it's put it in the law. So that basically refutes the entire concept of analysis, which is why I've fought so badly against this principle throughout my life in the Treasury. This principle is complete breach of all cost-benefit analysis, of all trade-offs, analysis of trade-offs, of all the reasoning that you can have for public policy. It completely destroys. It's like a nuclear bomb at the heart of public policy. And you've seen a wonderful demonstration in front of your eyes with this 22 crisis. But they're also everywhere. This is in the climate change space. This is in the great, Ocean Road Authority space. Anything and everything is allowed under this principle. Nothing can stop you. And so no politician that I'm aware of will ever agree to letting go of this power that we have managed to give them through the laws. The only time it'll happen is when the people wake up. But here's the beauty. The people out here would love a Survivor show, would love some reality show, would love the, Who Becomes a Millionaire or whatever show. They would love all these things and spend all the time on that, or they would love, going to the bar and all that. They would not want to spend a minute looking and reading looking at and reading these kind of things. So there's a kind of a problem we face, which is actually a universal problem, that people with their limited time, and I'm not blaming them, they've got limited time, they've been working hard the whole day, they need a bit of a breather. They're not going to pick up a book which is quite serious and start reading these issues. They won't pick up my book, they won't pick up my complaint to the ICC, even though it's free, that book, that complaint. It's too much hard work to read it. And so the people generally don't know, and so our politicians aren't telling them. The media, by the way, completely do not read anything. My experience of the media is I've never seen a worse media in my life. I probably shouldn't say that because I've seen it in India as well, pretty pathetic. The media is uniquely gifted in not reading anything. They have the knack of writing, of course, and they have the knack of speaking, which is why they have they come on television, but they do not read anything. They do not have any analytical skill, no critical thinking skill. Therefore, we are being fed from them nothing but their biases, their preconceptions, their feelings are converted into, no, this is a really big deal. This is the big thing. We should do this. So we're not getting any truth from them. The politicians aren't going to tell us anything because they don't want to give the powers. The people don't want to read anything because it's too hard. They're also very tired. So here we are, Sam.
When I brought Jordan Peterson to Melbourne, we had a little private meeting, and we were talking about how the internet, especially YouTube, not so much now, not so much today. This is three years ago. How YouTube is basically a new version of the Gutenberg press. So it just allows a lot of content to get everywhere. So I think that has been something that has been quite strong in that. Every time I talk to a young person, I say, well, how do you know about this? Because they'll be telling me something interesting about history or a law or something. And it always comes back to a short YouTube or some quite long YouTubes. Usually someone from the intellectual dark web, a Jordan Peterson, a Sam Harris, someone like that. So I think what I did notice is that when I had the Jordan Peterson events, people were coming from all over the country, but also from farms, from everywhere. And I said, well, when do you listen to Jordan Peterson? They say, well, when I'm on my tractor, doing the farming, I'll listen to podcasts. So they'll listen to 6-7 hours of podcasts all day. Even I watch hours and hours of stuff for the last 3 years. I still don't know about this new
precautionary principle.
Yes, precautionary principle.
Yes.
I'll turn that into a short.
It's an absolute deadly little thing out there, absolutely like a nuclear bomb sitting at the heart of government. Yeah. That has actually been the direct sole responsible principle for the policies that have been implemented in Australia in 2020. You read the actual memo of these guys, Brett Sutton, and read the High Court judgment and so on. Basically, that's the principle. That's the principle they've used. They said we had to take precautions. You know what economics is all about, saying we really need to look at the facts. That's the first thing we need to look at. And that, by the way, is how policy was done at one stage until this principle came in and said, no, you don't do policy by thinking. You do policy by feeling. So when the feelings of people are now converted into action, then you have mass destruction of property, private property, which is the businesses that you allude to. They've been confiscated. Let's be very clear. These businesses have been confiscated. If you have set up a shop, but you can't run it, you've been confiscated. Let's be very clear. The government has confiscated, tens of thousands or whatever of businesses. Right. So this mass confiscation of today's property, mass confiscation of the taxes of the future generations, because they're going to have to pay back all this stuff. That has all been done because Mr. Scott Morrison suddenly feels very scared. When he gets scared, he shuts down Australia's borders, and he promotes, and he actually promoted all these lockdowns. He was very strong in favor of lockdowns. And so we have Daniel Andrews and Scott Morrison and this whole gang of people who are very scared, but they have the precautionary principle to authorize them to convert their fear into action. And people like me sitting there saying, sorry, Scott Morrison, sorry, Daniel Andrews, this is not what the data are telling us. The data are telling us something different. Therefore, we need a cost-benefit analysis. And we will help you to do that. They don't want it. Did you ever see a cost-benefit analysis this time? Did the media ever ask for it? No. The media is absolutely and comprehensively failed to do its job as a journalist. As journalists, what is the journalist's job? Is it simply to report what the government is saying? Or is it to actually think for yourself? Tell me, ABC, I have left this job. ABC has not come and asked me once, why did you leave the job? ABC is paid by me. I'm paying ABC. It's not that I'm not paying Channel 7. Channel 9 has come and interviewed me in my home. Channel 7 has interviewed me in the Good Day, outside my home. And they didn't put out my other one, but at least they tried to interview me. ABC is actually paid by me to provide information to the people. Guess who is it that they will never ever have on their show? Guess. Why? Because I speak the truth, and the truth is totally deadly for them. The thing that therefore they feed the entire people of Australia is lies. And the people of Australia, because except a few who listen to different podcasts and so on, or go to social media, they're not getting alternative information. And the alternative information in this case is actually the truth. What you're getting is lies, and the alternative information is the truth, which, as I said again and again, is something I'm not cooking up. You can go and check for yourself, right? So we have a failure of such extraordinary proportions, and of course the precautionary principle being used and misused dramatically. So my condition to the political parties was, which I put out like a single four dot points. I said, you will make sure that there shall no longer be any emergency declaration in Australia during peacetime. You will make sure. That's your commitment. You will amend the constitution to ensure nobody can do that except in times of war, because if there's no emergency of that sort, then you have to follow the principles of law. But even then, the principles, you need to remove the precautionary principle completely, because the precautionary principle will still give you the power to do what these guys have done. So we got to be, and these are the conditions I put out. And guess what? What do you think? Not a single political party has come out saying that they will accept me in that in their party, because I want them to give power back to the people, and I want them to actually start thinking, to talk openly about the trade-offs. Let the people realize that there are costs and benefits. The fact that you have a lockdown may potentially stop some person from dying. Okay, may, but it will also kill and harm another 100 people. So tell me, what should I do? And as I said, the first principle should be to always to minimize the reduction of people's liberties through your public policy action. So these are the kind of things I've written in a manifesto. I've got a manifesto for my Indian political party, which is about 120 pages. And that contains that manifesto will be fantastic if applied to Australia as well, by the way.
Is that on Sabhlok City?
That's on my Swarn Bharat Party website, the party that I run. Yes, it's linked potentially from my blog.
I'll add the link.
But that's my manifesto for India. And I think the first principle there is do not reduce people's liberty just because you feel you want to save them or protect them or somebody. Let them decide what's good for them, and you tell them what it is. And so these are the kind of, I think, the basic principles of modern civilization, the Western civilization, I would say, not modern, which I thought we had imbibed in Australia, but I now realize we haven't. And the common man doesn't even understand, and the media don't even want to know. How many of people in this country have read my book? Nobody. I think the book is sitting out there without anyone having read. There are 9 reviews so far of the book. 9 reviews.
I saw.
It's been 4 months.
There was an interview for the Great Reset book, Klaus Schwab's Great Reset from the World Economic Forum.
Yeah, that must have
they
been
were laughing about that on a mainstream channel.
Yeah.
So, in terms of getting your book or someone to interview you,
but that's
good
not
luck.
Yeah, good luck. So there we are. We basically have a situation here of some sort. So I think if people like me don't assert our independence as humans, arising from the history of evolution, I do not owe myself allegiance to anybody except to myself. Okay, I come as a human being on this planet Earth. I will die as a human being. I will not allow anyone to trample me and create a sheep out of me or a chicken out of me. I'm not a chicken, guys. Be very clear. I will not let anyone do that. And that, I think, is the basic point. We want to wake up everybody and say the government is your servant. The government has, the powers of the government should be limited. And the government should not ever do what it has done in this case for this public health response, which is absolutely what China has done. Are we going to be a China? Is that our plan? We need to decide that. Okay, we need to decide whether we are basically a subsidiary of China, ideologically at least, which we have become, or are we going to be part of the Western civilization where the human individual liberty and choice is predominant thing to consider. If we don't get back that spirit of what I wrote in my article, the spunk. There's a bit of a spunk. You detected me a bit of a spunk. I'm a spunky guy.
Okay.
Well, a bit of it.
Spunky, yeah, spunky
a bit
guy.
of it. I really don't care a damn for anyone who tries to suppress me. I really will come out and fight, right? That spunk is required. That spunk will also help Australia when China comes and attacks us physically. Remember that. If you are cowards, which is what I think many Australians have become, if Australians are going to be cowards and get frightened to death from a bloody little virus, okay, you do not know what's going to hit you in the future. You are creating a generation of cowards. It is not appropriate for us, people who went to Gallipoli and people who fought the World War II and the Vietnam War and so on. We see the War Memorial. I love going to the War Memorial because I've got a very long, deep connection with the wars that we have fought against, these criminals, Nazis and so on. This is a historically of great interest to me, but also the very idea of fighting for your liberty. That tradition, and guess what? We said we are not going to go have this, Anzac Day last year. And we're not going to have the Australia Day this year. So we're basically telling, our police are telling us, because they're scared, they're going to make us into cowards. And therefore, we do not have any more children and young people to stand for themselves. When China comes and says, hey, if you don't do this, I'm going to put a bomb on Melbourne. Are we going to surrender? Are we going to surrender? I mean, there's a thing called basic spunk, basic standing on your own fate. I think there's something missing in Australia today. I think that's the point I'm trying to make to Australians. Guys, wake up, because this is not the country I think you want to live in. I've got only another, 20, 30 years at the most to live. Many of the kids out here have 50 years, 80 years, 100 years to live. What about them? Are they going to be, because China is growing bigger and bigger. Be very sure that they're going to attack you at one fine day. There will be a physical attack on Australia. No doubt about it. Are we going to hand over Australia to them in a platter? We need to develop a sense of character. I think I'm talking for all people in the world, including the Chinese, who should defeat and get rid of the CCP. But look, these are the kind of general thoughts, I guess, that we need to consider while looking at this events, while looking at the events of 2020, 21. Like, who are we? And what do we want to become? I keep emphasizing this in my writings. I wrote in this, letter to the editor, to the Australian. This is not about the virus. This is about who we are. Are we cowards? Are we people who get scared and stop thinking and stop reasoning? Are we obedient servants and sheep and chicken of our political masters? What are we? It's a bit of a thinking process here, guys. I really think, even if no one has yet started thinking, as you said, I really don't know who's thinking, but I'm thinking about it. I'm thinking a lot about it, because that's what I've actually learned from a very young age, when I started reading Socrates and Voltaire, and I read Candide and so on. I've come to the view that we must ensure basic human liberty and respect. And if that is not assured, then I think the whole life becomes a question mark. What kind of a life are we leading if you're just going to have safety first? That's what this, Glenn Hunt comes and says, Greg Hunt or whatever. Safety first. Australia's first principle, safety first. No, it's freedom first. Our party's motto in India is liberty first. Liberty, liberty, liberty first. If you remove liberty, you will not have security either. And maybe I can assure you that. In fact, Benjamin Franklin has a very good quote on that. But really, that's the fundamental issue, that without fighting for your liberty, you are not in a position to defend your safety or security. So this is all linked together, right, with your integrity as a human being. And if you don't have the self-respect of a human being to actually stand for the kind of independence that nature has given us, I attribute myself to I'm a part of nature. Does the bird, have any, does the bird consider any other bird to be superior? No, they're basically just individuals living their own life. Even the ant has got self-respect. But here we are in Australia without self-respect, allowing all these guys to bulldoze anything they want without any reasons, forcing masks on us, forcing us to stay indoors, locking our borders, locking international borders, and then potentially, that's what we are hearing, forcing us to get vaccinated. Look, I'm not against vaccinations. I'm actually very proud that we've got these, new vaccines. I'm very happy with that. And we need to test them and make sure that they're safe and all that, and they actually work. But I have nothing against vaccines. But I would be dead against any mandates. I would want people to be told, these are the pros and cons. These are the risks you face. Now go and pick what you want to do.
treat people like adults.
Treat them like human beings, for God's sake. We are not your sheep that you can inoculate, or your chicken in the put a little injection in the chicken. I don't think we want to live like that. So I'm not living like that, and I will not let anyone stop me from living like that. But if others want to, that's their choice, right? And I'm saying that, look, you got to wake up. So the guys who really suffered a lot, as you said, there are a lot of people who are very supportive of Scott Morrison, blah, great hero, Dan, I stand with Dan, etc. Please stand for yourself, for God's sake, for once. Stand for yourself. Think about who you are and what you want to be. I think that's the basic point, right? What are we? Okay, all right.